Miguel de Cervantes Saavedra lived from 1547 until 1616 in a period that spread over the peak and decline of Spain's brilliant age. For his entire life he shared the standards of an optimistic public reason that prompted Spain's brilliance and destruction, when the country was the Catholic rampart against a reorganization-torn Europe and against the bewitching advances of the forceful Turkish power. Permeated with chivalrous endeavors, Spain was glad for its legendary legends, Cortés and Pizarro, who quelled whole populaces in the New World and delivered a flood of gold that upheld the military could of Charles V and Philip II. Regardless of the rich American wellspring of fortune, the safeguard of Spain depleted the assets of its workers and of its provinces until, at the loss of the Armada, the nation was too ruined to even think about recuperating. With the downfall of Spanish power, England and the transformation nations of Europe started their domination. Naturally introduced to penurious conditions, Miguel Cervantes was the fourth child in a group of 7 kids. His dad, Rodrigo, was a specialist, one of the salaried workers of the College of Alcalá de Henares, the origin of Miguel, and he procured very little to take care of his loved ones. Little is known about Cervantes' initial life, however it is far-fetched assuming he gotten a lot of proper schooling. At the point when he was 20, Miguel was in the entourage of the Cardinal Nuncio Aquaviva and spent his administration in Rome. Enlisting in the military with his sibling Rodrigo, he partook in the skirmish of Lepanto where the Spanish laid out predominance of sea power against the Turks. Wiped out underneath decks, Cervantes demanded joining the fight in a most uncovered position. He battled fearlessly, getting 2 shots in his chest and an injury that delivered his left hand pointless the remainder of his life. This gashed hand was his brilliance, and the fortitude he displayed at Lepanto procured him a record of proposal from Don Juan himself, the Austrian stepbrother of Philip who instructed the Spanish powers. After a long healing, Cervantes rejoined the military to take on in the renowned conflict of La Galita, referenced in the captive story. He additionally crusaded in Tunis, Sardinia, Naples, Sicily, and Genoa, finding out a lot about Italian culture during this time of administration. Getting back with Rodrigo to Spain, their boat was caught by privateers and the 2 siblings were sold as slaves in Algiers. His story of his extraordinary dauntlessness during those 5 years is practically amazing, for Cervantes conspired over and over, for his own break, however for the freedom of various individual slaves. Each time he fizzled, he announced he alone, and not his comrades, was at fault, realizing without a doubt the outrages saved for rebuffing got away from Christians. The savage Dey of Algiers, Hassan Pasha, in any case, was dazzled by the daringness of the debilitated Spaniard and consistently saved him. Despite the fact that Rodrigo was ultimately emancipated, it was only after a lot later that Miguel's payoff was arranged. In 1580, Cervantes got back to Spain, disfigured, with next to no method for work. Casanova was dead and despised by the ruler, so Miguel couldn't expect any elevation through his proposals. Out of urgency, he started to compose for the theater, however of upwards of 30 or 40 plays a couple have made do. During this period, Cervantes engaged in extramarital relations with a Portuguese young lady who ultimately abandoned him, passing on their little girl Isabel de Saavedra for him to raise. Still a fruitless dramatist at 40 years old, Cervantes wedded the little girl of a wealthy rancher, Catalina Salazar y Vosmediano. Little is known about his significant other, yet the marriage was not an effective one. During this season of life, Cervantes needed to help, other than his better half and normal girl Isabel, his mom, 2 sisters and the bereft mother by marriage. He applied for some respectful help posts and in the long run was conceded a task as store-gathering groceries for the invincible Armada. It is during this period that Cervantes figured out how to know the Spanish worker, and his amassed information was to bring about the production of Sancho Panza. Accounting was a confounded and laborious technique, and Cervantes was 2 times detained for owing cash to the depository from a deficiency in his records. Cervantists differ whether the Seville jail was where he started to compose Don Quixote. In the prelude, the writer clues to the peruser that you might assume it, Don Quixote, the child of disturbance, caused in some grim jail. This line is the reason for discussion among biographers. Disaster kept on hounding him when he was out of jail, as though to obstruct the synthesis of his showstopper. At last finished in 1604, the Quixote was a quick success. Running into 6 versions a year from that point forward, Cervantes got no further benefit from the book, other than the cash initially paid him by his distributor. The progress of his work, in any case, intrigued the Count of Lemos and the Cardinal Archbishop of Toledo, who turned into his benefactors, despite the fact that they didn't do a lot to advance Cervantes' hopeless conditions. 67 years of age, actually hounded by neediness and with his well-being coming up short, Cervantes started the continuation of Don Quixote just to find that a privateer release of his thought had become famous. As though to answer to this shrewd distribution, Cervantes immediately finished Part 2. During this concise range of his life between the ages of 57 and 69, Cervantes distributed his exemplary novels, 12 accounts of Spain, which make due as keen records of the nearby existence of that time. He likewise distributed a few plays, 8 interludes and 8 comedies, which manifest a sensational ability that his previous pieces never entirely accomplished. His last work, The Troubles of Persiles and Sigismunda, is eminent mostly for its preamble devoted to the selfish Count of Lemos. Aubrey Bell, a remarkable Cervantist, believes this work to be the most pitiful and superb goodbye in all writing. Cervantes, composing from his deathbed, started the preamble, "With one foot currently in the stirrup and with the misery of death upon me, extraordinary master, I keep in touch with you." Cervantes passed on in April 1616, that very month that denotes the demise of William Shakespeare. In spite of the fact that Don Quixote is perhaps of the most perused novel on the planet, as well as one of the longest, and keeps on being a success, the existence of Spain's most noteworthy creator is less known than the existences of lesser scholarly figures. What is exceptional in the meager true-to-life date accessible about Cervantes is the energy and warmth that emanated from the character of this penurious, disastrous figure. A result of the glad Catholic-propelled Spanish legacy, Cervantes trusted verifiably in strict universality and military chivalry. Like Don Quixote, Cervantes went through existence with a solid feeling of direction. Meeting with hardship and disappointment like his legend, Cervantes added to development, potentially because of his own backgrounds, individuals and the upsides of Don Quixote.